World War II, the bloodiest and deadliest war mankind has ever witnessed. While the war was raging on in the front lines, there were many heinous acts being brought upon living people. From 1939 to 1946, the world suffered, experiencing humanity at its lowest point. Today, we focus on the Japanese Americans who were wrongly imprisoned without committing any crime. This is their story.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The bombing of Pearl Harbor. Despite the U.S.'s initial avoidance, war hesitated for no one and arrived on America's front doorstep in the form of 353 Imperial Japanese aircrafts. This direct attack on U.S. soil enraged the citizens of the nation, with many demanding justice for the thousands of lives lost. On December 8, 1941, in an almost unanimous vote, the U.S. declared war on Japan. This major event served as a catalyst for the U.S. involvement in the war. Espionage, secrets, paranoia. The U.S. quickly became a breeding ground for many rumors during this tense time period. To make matters worse, Hawaii was made up of over 150,000 Japanese Americans. Blinded by fear and prejudice, many instantly began to assume the worst in others. February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed and issued Executive Order 9066. This demanded that anyone deemed as a national threat had to be forcibly relocated.
If Japanese forces should try to invade our shores, military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move.
Thousands of Japanese Americans were evacuated and moved inland. The mass hysteria spread to neighboring countries as well. Canada and Mexico followed suit, and they rounded up Japanese citizens living on their west coast as well. The majority of people responded with indifference, but some even responded with support for these internment camps. Here we can see the locations of all 10 internment camps. A majority of them were near the west coast, but there were some scattered more inland near the deserts. Ken Mochizuki is an author whose parents were relocated in one of these internment camps. He wrote the picture book, Baseball Saved Us, which talks about how the prisoners played baseball to pass time, as well as some other details about life in the camps. Quote, "We weren't in a camp that was fun, like a summer camp. Ours was in the middle of nowhere, and we were behind a barbed wire fence. Soldiers with guns made sure we stayed there, and the man in the tower saw everything we did, no matter where we were." End quote. Life in these camps provided the bare minimum. Families were crammed into small, unfurnished barracks without any running water. These camps were also in the desert, which caused sandstorms and intense heat constantly. These camps were run humanely, but the prisoners always had snipers in towers watching them 24 hours a day. Once the war was over, the camps came down, and the Japanese Americans were finally able to go back to their normal lives after almost 4 years. This proved to be quite a challenge, however. Former prisoner Aki Kuros shares her story after the internment camps. Aki Kuros was only 16 years old when her family was relocated. She was born in Seattle, Washington. She was born a U.S. citizen. After leaving the camps, she, along with other Japanese prisoners, were met with extreme racism. It was a severe challenge for her family to find a new home and job. Kuros graduated and became an activist and a teacher. She was faced with prejudice and injustice, but continued to fight for racial equality. August 10, 1988. Almost 50 years since the beginning of the Japanese internment camps, President Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act. Along with this act came something even more important: a sincere apology.
And it's not for us today to pass judgment upon those who may have made mistakes while engaged in that great struggle. Yet we must recognize that the internment of Japanese Americans was just that, a mistake.
Racial prejudice, wartime hysteria, failure of political leadership. Those three things alone have turned the U.S. into the very enemy they were fighting. The Japanese internment camps will stand as one of the most atrocious violations of U.S. civil rights in the 20th century. It is our obligation to continue to learn and study about tragedies such as these. By honoring the legacies of the victims from the past, we strive to build our path towards a brighter future.